Thumbs up, so it's time to go. Well, first of all, welcome new members to the committee. Hope you enjoy our year ahead. I understand we also have Councillor Kippax online as well. So straight away, we'll move to apologies. John.
There are no apologies for absences for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, John. 2 minutes to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of April. Are you content with the content? Agree? Great. Sorry. Andrew? Right. Content with the minutes. 3 declarations of interest. Any member have anything to declare? No. 4, public participation time. There is none tonight. 5 is minutes of the Audit and Governance Subcommittee, but no meetings have been held, which means we move straight to item 6, which is report of internal audit activity. Before we do that, I'm going to ask Jonathan Mayer to make his statement, please. Thank you, Jonathan.
Good evening, members. After that pause, and for the benefit of anyone watching online who doesn't know me, I'm Jonathan Mayer. I'm the Director of Legal and Democratic. I'm also the Council's Monitoring Officer, which means that I'm responsible for helping to ensure that councillors act within and through the law. On your agenda this evening, members, you have 2 main items. Firstly, an internal audit report on contract expenditure and compliance with the Council's Constitution and Scheme of Delegation. And secondly, you have the internal auditor's overall annual assurance opinion. Members may recall that at the February Cabinet meeting, the Cabinet Member for Finance referred to a further significant internal audit investigation report. That further report concerns health and safety compliance and is referred to in the overall annual opinion report as one of the reasons why the head of internal audit will be issuing a limited assurance opinion. However, for legal reasons, the health and safety compliance report does not feature on your agenda this evening, and it must not be discussed. Members of the committee have not seen that report, but with the support of the chairman, I will need to interrupt the meeting if members do begin to stray into commenting on matters that are covered by that report. The health and safety compliance report will, though, be brought to a future meeting so that members can ensure that the council learns from the report's findings, though it will be necessary at that time for parts of the report to remain confidential and for members of this committee only. Chairman, thank you very much for allowing me to make that statement.
Thank you, Jonathan. So item 6 will be presented by Angie Hooper, Principal Auditor for SWAP. Angie.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Angie Hooper, Principal Auditor, SWAP Internal Audit Services. This update report concerns only the findings of the contract and expenditure compliance with Council Constitution and Scheme of Delegation audit, which has been given a limited assurance and identified as a significant risk. This audit was agreed with a monitoring officer following the initial findings of the investigation that SWAP's counter-fraud team have been conducting, and the scope was to ascertain whether there were sufficient controls in place to ensure compliance with a scheme of delegation in relation to expenditure and the award of contracts for specialist professional services. Our detailed findings and action plan are included in your pack, but I'm just going to summarise the main findings here. Due to the functionality of SWAP, we are unable to provide assurance that all expenditure has been approved in line with the Council's Constitution and Scheme of Delegation. Over a 2-year period, 99% of work for specialist professional services or statement of works projects has been awarded to a single supplier, and it is unclear whether any form of mini competition has taken place, which makes it difficult to demonstrate value for money. Following the conclusion of our work, a further issue around agreement of terms and conditions alongside the overarching contract has been identified. Approval processes for statement of works projects have not been consistently followed with the required sign-off by finance and commercial and procurement colleagues. Budgets for statement of works projects have been increased potentially multiple times, and it is unclear whether these have obtained the required approvals. SAP, which is the Council's kind of finance system, does not have the functionality to place budgetary commitments, which can make it difficult to accurately project spend against budgets. Administration and management of projects within the contractor system does not provide adequate separation of duty, and users can also be given user permissions to impersonate another user without an appropriate audit trail in place. Actions have been agreed with officers, and we will follow these up and report back to the committee in August. Sally and I are happy to take any questions about that report. Thank you.
I'm sure you're expecting a few. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Simon Roach, independent co-opted member. I have some simple clarification questions, if I may, just at first, just to ensure I fully understand what is in the report and what you've said. So hopefully they're sort of one-sentence answers. That's all I'm looking for. So where you talk about the trade and the non-trade transactions, you give numbers of transactions that are in the scope of what you've looked at. And you talked about 47,000 transactions that are non-trade, i.e. don't require a prior purchase order. Do you know the value of that spend?
Not off the top of my head, I don't know, I'm afraid not. But we could get that to you.
But it's the value of that spend that is potentially difficult for you to assess whether it's been approved in accordance with the scheme of delegation. It's the non-trade spend in particular, is it? Thank you. You then talk about the commensurate payments system, or the commensurate system. And obviously those payments are part of non-trade, I think I understand from what you're saying. So that's a subset of the total non-trade amount that you're talking about. And in your report, you talked about some statement of works that you've looked at, 191 from May 23 to February 2025, that are subject to an increase in spend. And then you mentioned 14.8 million. Now, is that the total spend that has gone through commensurate, or is it just those that have got a budget increase?
That's not the total amount of money that's gone through, no.
Thank you. So there's more than 14.8 million that's gone through that system. That's what I want to understand. Thank you. And then you say 99% of the work is awarded to a single supplier. And I didn't quite understand how that could be. If commensurate is used or CNET is used to recruit and bring on board originally contract workers and then services. So is the single supplier a sort of an umbrella company that Commensura uses for the provision of these contractors? Is that why it's a single supplier?
No, it's not a single supplier. It's rather than having a mini competition, it's not one supplier. It could be a different supplier for different statements of works and different contracts. But the contract is, the framework is set up so you can either have award directly to one supplier, or you can have a mini competition where different suppliers bid for that piece of work.
So where you say 99% has gone to a single supplier then, so that supplier is providing a series or statement of works with different individuals providing those services. That's what I'm not understanding.
Yeah, it's not just one supplier. It could be different.
Could I just butt in and ask John?
I'll have a go at this. So Commensura is a neutral vendor. So they're a company that we have procured and we've got a contract with them. They have a contract with multiple other suppliers. And we can either place orders through the Commensura system, direct awarding to one of a whole host of different companies that they have, or we can conduct a mini competition through the system, putting our requirements out and having a number of companies bid for the work. But when we're talking about single supplier, there are loads of suppliers on the Commensura arrangement. So that will be lots of direct awards to lots of separate companies for a whole host of different types of professional services. So not arrangements, not direct awards with an individual person, but direct awards to companies for them to provide different types of service to us. So some of those might be consultancy, but it won't be us contracting with an individual consultant. It's us contracting with a company who provide consultancy services. Some of the other things that we've used Commensura for are surveys and testing. We've got building survey work done through Commensura with companies who are on their books, but lots of them, so lots of individual direct awards with lots of different companies who are signed up to Commensura.
Thank you. So I think I must have misread then. So it's 99% of the work has been directly awarded. It's not that it's gone to a single supplier. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then one last question for clarification. And the question is that you also mention about the controls for users, and you talk about customer admin users are able to impersonate, which is the language being used, impersonate other users, but there's no audit trail that they've been impersonated. Do we know how many customer admin users there are? Are there a handful or tens, or do you know the number?
I don't know the exact numbers, but I think it is a handful, would be more accurate than lots and lots of them.
Okay, thank you. So that ends my clarification questions. I might have some other questions as the debate goes on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Andy, if you'd like to ask.
Councillor Andy Todd, Coalhill, Wimborne Minster East. My question is just following on from the Commensura question. It's not unusual for suppliers that large amounts of money go to for organisations to do a level of due diligence on them as well. Have we ever done any process audit or just sat people in the organisation to see how Commensura operates, how they award contracts, or do we just take their statements on trust?
assume that one of you is going to answer that.
Hi, so Sean Creamer, Corporate Director for Finance and Commercial and Deputy 151 Officer. I don't believe we've sent someone in I've been here just over 2 years. I don't think during my time we've done a kind of a shadowing opportunity of sending someone to sit alongside them and work with them. We have, as part of Connect to Dorset, one of the arrangements is we have a kind of a lead officer, so we are much more closely involved in the processes. So that's one of those improvements where we've introduced Connect to Dorset. And if that was a recommendation of the committee, I suppose we probably could have a look at someone doing that shadowing piece of work, and if that may help with some of the lessons learned as we kind of respond to this, as it certainly has identified a number of kind of quirks in exactly how processes have worked and some assumptions that were made in the process. So.
Is there anybody else? I mean, what we have here is a significant failure of this internal systems. And we as a committee would like to ask a number of searching questions which we're unable to at this point in time due to not having the health and safety report referred to by Jonathan Mayer in front of us. This will come at a later stage. So no doubt we will have a far more frank discussion in the future. Right now, we need some assurances that the officer group is going to do something about this right now. I also note that there appears to be no member oversight to that particular group. And I believe that we, as a committee, would be prudent to appoint some members from this committee to oversee that work, to at least see how that work is going and to be reported back to in the interim, because I don't believe we're likely to see the main report until, Jonathan, you'll have to tell me, but I believe perhaps late July, August. Is that correct?
Chairman, I don't have a specific date for that yet, but possibly your July meeting.
I describe the current situation as frustrating at best because, as I say, from Jonathan's statement, it's extremely awkward to get into the nitty-gritty of what's happened here. But in the interim, Jonathan, if you could just say exactly who is looking at this current position, please.
Chairman, I'm going to ask Grace Evans to outline for you the members of the group and some of the recent work that they've been doing and some initial work on a first recommendation to SLT.
Thank you, Jonathan. Sorry, members, I should have introduced myself the first time round. I'm Grace Evans. I'm Head of Legal Services and Deputy Monitoring Officer. So since we received the first draft of the report from our internal auditors, we formed a small working group of officers to start looking at the recommendations, mindful that some of the recommendations had quite tight timescales on them. In fact, one of them had a timescale of last week before even before your meeting. So the working group of officers is myself and Sean. We have one of the senior contract lawyers from the legal team. We have the head of financial strategy. We have the head of the procurement team and a senior finance officer on the working group. We've been taking a look at the recommendations, the findings and the recommendations, and we've been starting to act on them. So the first finding in the report refers to the scheme of delegation, the financial parts of the scheme of delegation, and a recommendation that we look at aligning some of the financial thresholds in SAP. We've done a detailed piece of work reviewing the scheme of delegation financial thresholds, the whole financial section of the scheme of delegation. And we've reported some recommendations to SLT. We have an opportunity to meet with SLT on the 10th of June, where we'll be presenting those recommendations to them. And then assuming they support them, those recommendations will be coming back to your committee on the 30th of June, with a view then to taking the recommendations on to full council in July. So we're on track with the very first recommendation of the report. And we are already starting to look at some of the other recommendations in the report. In particular, we've done some work on training and guidance, and we have put together a plan of training and guidance that can be rolled out for officers over the year. We've also started to have a look at the findings and the actions recommendations concerning commensurate. We've done a review of the commensurate contract, and we will be looking at whether we wish to extend the contract further from March next year. And so those sorts of things are the things that we would be able to bring back to a member oversight group, in addition to bringing them back to this committee, if you wish.
I definitely wish. Andy, do you want to ask?
Councillor Todd, Coalhill and Wimborne Minster East. I'm going to tiptoe here because I don't know where I'm allowed to go. So am I allowed to ask a question about the construction of the original scheme of delegation? I am a new councillor, only elected last year, so I was not in post during the last 5 years or during the shadow cabinet. So I wasn't familiar with the way things were structured at the time. Stop me if I go off, please. I hear this phrase, working at speed. I think that was the phrase that's been used. At pace, working at pace a lot. When the different authorities were being merged together, I imagine, I do not know, so I would ask officers to confirm, were redundancies made that perhaps went further than was possible for the council to then continue to manage things like payments to third parties and so forth?
Chairman, I'm Jonathan Mayer, Director of Legal and Democratic. So I was the shadow monitoring officer in the run-up to the formation of Dorset Council, and I worked with colleagues from the predecessor councils on the new council's constitution, including its scheme of delegation. I don't believe that the issues that are highlighted in this report are about redundancies in the formation of Dorset Council, that we had too few people operating within the scheme of delegation. It's apparent from the swap investigation report that this in fact goes back to changes that were made, I believe the report says 2009, in the predecessor county council, when changes were made in the the SAP-based finance system. And I don't believe that it's anything to do with efficiencies, economies that were made when we went from nine principal local authorities to 2 in Dorset.
I may well be wrong. I'm going to push back just a little bit, if I may, Jonathan. There is a section of the report where it does specifically talk about backlogs in payments, and that was one of the reasons why workarounds may have entered the system. Is that not true?
That's certainly the justification that was put to internal audit colleagues. but I believe that that was a reference to events that took place in 2009 when changes were made in the SAP-based finance system. So prior to local government reorganisation, a decade prior to local government reorganisation in 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Simon Roach, Cooperative Member. I have a comment and a question. The comment is that I, along with others, have complained several times at this committee about the inability of budget holders to maintain the budget. And interestingly, there's a number of items in this report, investigation report, that points to areas that would frustrate the ability of a budget holder to manage the budget. Obviously, the shortcomings in the scheme of delegation implementation, the potential lack of competition that is articulated, the fact that statement of work commitments, as they grow over time, don't show up in budget forecasting, and there are a number of others as well. But every time I've asked about, why we can't manage the budget, there's never any indication of those processes or processes like it that generate a frustration in people being able to manage the budget. The question I have is that, when you read through the list of issues in this area, they address areas of accountability, segregation of duties, documentation, transparency, some of the key tenets of good financial and internal control. And there are a number of examples of each of those areas failing. And the question I have is it unreasonable for us to expect that either the finance organisation, the external auditors, or indeed the internal auditors would have been able to have identified such significant issues, seeing as they seem to have been in place for a number of years? It's not like it's a recent event. And so that, to me, goes to the heart of accountability. Who should really be accountable for ensuring that we don't have failures as significant as this? I know, obviously, that this committee plays a role in that. But I do worry whether we've got the accountability right. And I'd appreciate a comment from yourself, Mr. Chairman, or any of the finance committee, finance members on that, please. Thank you.
Can I just come to Andrew Parry, but I would very much like to make a statement about that.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Andrew Parry, West Parley Ward. I think we can't skirt around the subject of the engagement with elected members in this process and what we're aiming to do in the review of the process. And when Grace was so eloquently setting out the framework for what was being talked about, I got a sense from it, I may have missed it, there was a latter reference to elected members, but certainly not in the early stages of the piece of work you're doing in engagement with elected members. And it rather felt like you were going to present something to this committee for rubber stamping. And I suspect you may find, as elected members, we're not in that space and mind. We're rather more concerned that we want to see this. In terms of local authority procurement, I haven't asked every group here, but I have had informal conversations over a number of years with elected members. And there has always felt like a sense of frustration with the framework local government uses in that, and I think you may have touched upon it, it does rather set out a very prescriptive way for any organisation to apply for contract work, which you would expect. But as a result of that, we end up with a very small pool of companies that can cope with our procurement process. And that potentially sounds like a part of the problem in trying to find enough competition to justify value for money in the work that we do. And I wonder if that is something that we're starting to see here. Or, and I'd be really concerned about this, have we set up a framework where in order to expedite work being carried out quickly, we have inadvertently created a system that is the route of least resistance for officers to go in procuring work to be carried out. But my ask of this, Chair, and I'm very much with you on this, is the piece of work that is going on between now and our next committee meeting. I really do think we should see member involvement. I would expect at least a cabinet member to be appointed to it, and a member of this committee as well.
Thank you. Earlier on, I mentioned the frustration of this committee. I've been sat here for a year now, listening to reports telling me that broadly everything's all right, when in the fact is it's not at all. And this has highlighted a significant failure within the risk management, the systems, and the compliance. And we will have a report later on which will give us more detail. However, I would suggest that the audit and governance needs to concentrate more on risk management and compliance and questions regarding the budgetary controls within this council. After all, head of finance portfolio holder spends an enormous amount of time trying to get a budget that balances, and the very next day, someone breaks it immediately. And I'm sure he shares the frustration that we've all shared as we go through the year and watch it escalate. Someone has to sign that money off, and there has to be a reason for it. We seem to fail to concentrate on those significant sums within this committee. Whilst I listen to long tales of treasury management, long reports, etc., I don't feel we're getting into the nitty-gritty, and I think this has highlighted the situation that we find ourselves in. So I would very much like us to work together for a different direction, one that looks searchingly at why the budgets are going wrong every year, regardless who makes them, and who is signing that off and who is agreeing to it. After all, we're talking about several £1 million in each year, and that audit and governance surely is our role to try and work out what's going wrong. I know, of course, from my own experience, there is insufficient funds. However, we set a budget legally to balance. And I think we need to concentrate on that far more. Within this report, if you only look at, say, finding 4, you have a snapshot of a number of budgets. The original budgets, for example, number 1, £5,965 has now become £212,000. Questions will be asked, I'm sure. And no doubt when we get to the main report, which will come later in the year, whether it be the end of July, beginning of August, at that point, we're going to have a very frank discussion, and we are going to change the direction of this committee. Well, certainly while I'm controlling it, we are. While I'm chairman, we are. And a lot of the questions, Simon, that you've asked in the past, which seem to get brushed aside, and I know that frustrate you, we're going to get the answers to those. And I know that Neil himself, I've spoken to Neil, I've spoken to others. I think we share a view that we would very much like far more answers to the questions, not long answers that get us nowhere, actually specific responses. Does anybody else want to make a comment about that or disagree with me? Spencer does.
I will. No, I don't intend to disagree with you at all, because I agree with everything you've said. But the report, page 16, for example, I've highlighted a couple of significant paragraphs in there, which deals with the point that Andy raised earlier. This isn't a resource issue. This is a compliance issue. This is a lack of financial control issue. This is a lack of transparency. This is a role for this committee to play in making sure we police the way we go about the work we do in this council. So I have said in another place when we were having a discussion about this, the report is a really clear analysis of the problem we're faced with. We just need to get on with it now and make sure that we deal with the very things that I've just touched on.
Thank you. Roger.
Roger Ong, co-opted member. just a general question, which Jonathan, tell me if I'm allowed to ask it. SWAP have actually identified these issues. We've heard these issues have been going on for many, many years. We've been signed off by our external auditors who are supposed to do random sample checks through our systems and procedures, but apparently none of that has been picked up. Are we having conversations with our either current and also previous auditors about this?
Sally, would you like to respond, or was it something that maybe Sean would like to pass? You could pass the buck to Sean.
Sean's got
So Sean Creamer, Corporate Director for Finance and Commercial, and it is something that we are in conversation with our current external auditors, who are also in the room, but probably won't be invited to speak this evening. There are some assumptions, as you described, that there are like a number of lines of defence against this type of thing, ranging from internal controls, how systems are set up, spot checking, analysis, etc. So we are in conversation, and you'll remember that the 23-24 value for money opinion from Grant Thornton was aware of some of this, and we received a red kind of RAG rating for our value for money. So we're absolutely in conversation with them, absolutely focused on lessons learned, how to take recommendations as to how to tighten up controls, in particular, and benefit from their experience where they've worked across different clients, and to draw some of that learning of who else is using these systems and is there a better way to do it. And as what's been picked up in the conversation this evening is that the SAP system was put in many years ago. We're about to go out to procure a replacement. So a lot of that learning can also go into making sure that the criteria for the new system bakes this stuff in, so it's not possible to change authorization levels or change a budget, for example, as has been identified in the paper. So we're absolutely having these conversations, looking at the lessons learned.
I think we should not cast aside the fact that they were also so far behind in their audits of our years that we ended up signing off purely to move forward, and that it won't be for another year or two, but we have a solid set of opening balances that we can rely on. Correct?
That's correct, yeah. So we're going through what's described like a progressive level of assurance, where there's increasing levels of assurance based on the opening balances and closing balances as we kind of move through that process. So I think it's next financial 25-26 audit opinion, I think, will be when we kind of hope to be all clear based on having an audited set of closing balances into opening, into closing.
Sorry, did I see a hand? Richard, did I see your hand?
Evening. Richard Biggs, Property Assets, Economic Growth. And as you're probably aware, I was the Chairman of Audit and Governance in your position in the previous administration. This is extremely disturbing, what we've seen here and the governance controls. But I think there were clear warning signs that the system was failing in similar areas. And I can point you to two previous audit reports, limited assurance. One was the use of temporary consultant staff under commensurate contract. That was November 23, where it said the council currently manually reports non-compliance spend against the commensurate contract. And also in March 24, the repairs, maintenance, minor and small capital works framework contract. There does not appear to be established consistent systems in place for requesting estimates, authorising spend over the limits. So there does appear to be a consistent failing within contract management areas, which don't seem, well, we were told that things are happening. Clearly, they didn't happen, or they just happened in another area, or were happening. But it is concerning that all this can seem to get through the system without being spotted, and whatever we can do, and your good selves, to address this as soon as possible is long work on. But I don't want to stray into the other area, but it is really concerning. Thank you.
Thank you. Earlier on, we mentioned member oversight. It would be nice to set up a small group now, if possible, while you're all here. Or Jonathan, you've obviously got an opinion.
Chairman, if I could just come to that very point and to Councillor Parry's comment a little earlier, and just to apologise if we gave an impression from officers that we were looking to members of this committee later and to the full council to rubber stamp officer work. What would usually happen with internal audit actions is that action would be recommended. Officers would come up with a plan then to address the actions and areas of concern that auditors had identified, and we would act on those operationally. But I think we've gone beyond that in this instance, and I would certainly, and I think all three of us here this evening would welcome that sort of member oversight of the actions that we were bringing forward as a proposal to address the concerns identified in this report.
You're in agreement then? Okay, I would suggest maybe 4 people, do you think? We don't want the whole committee. I'm wondering if that should be led by the portfolio holder for finance. Does he think about that?
Simon Clifford, Cabinet Member for Finance, as so quaintly introduced there. I think I'll be fine. I'm very happy to try to get the assurance that we need. And I think that's the big issue that we have, is that it's all well and good getting a report saying things are fine, but this report shows that we can't trust some of those reports. So I think a detailed look with member involvement would be helpful.
Thank you. Any volunteers? Beryl? Neil? Yourself? Okay. Well, I've got Beryl, Neil, Spencer, and Clifford. Are you happy with that? And obviously, it will come back to us. If you want one extra, I'm not precious about it. Right, we'll agree on those 4 then. Okay. Any more questions on this particular paper? So I've got Simon first, then I'll come to you, Beryl.
Again, just trying to dance around the legalities. We've got this report in front of us. The report says it will be doing a follow-up in August. We've already alluded to the fact there's another report due to come. There's going to be work. So at some stage, this will all coalesce. It will all come together, and we'll have a session where we can be assured and other councillors can be assured that situations have been resolved. I wonder if I could just ask this question, because I'm frankly shocked at the findings that have been put in front of us, as I'm sure anyone in this chamber is, particularly a series of failures that mean that we as a council can't, we are unable to say whether tens of £1 millions have been spent properly and we got value for money. And I think that's something that cuts to the heart of everything that this council does. So when we get this eventual series of reports, will we be able to have a discussion that will involve how it's happened, whether it's still happening, what assurances we will have as a group of councillors, and ultimately, as Simon said, who is accountable?
I think, Jonathan, you have to respond to that particular question. It's what I think every member will want but we seek your comment.
So, Chairman, I would expect the committee to want to focus on the first of those items. Within your terms of reference, the role of this committee is absolutely about organisational learning. What you won't be able to do specifically in this committee, is to deal with questions of individual accountability, because those are dealt with elsewhere within the council. But you're absolutely entitled to expect that those will be addressed where they should be addressed, but it's simply not in an audit and governance committee. Thank you.
Beryl.
Thank you, Chair. Beryl Hazard, Wareham Councillor, new to this committee, but in my capacity in the past as an MOD contractor and the hoops that we used to jump through for that, I was a contract manager at Farnborough. I know exactly what some of the things when I've sort of, well, not been that privy with all the things that were going on, but I would like to actually be able to share some of the information that I went through in those days, and that was about 15 years ago, but it was 15 years before that. But things still pertain very similarly, and sometimes in local authorities, the same as the MOD. But what I might like to say, is this an EAP or a task and finish group or subcommittee that is actually confidential? Are those three things, please?
Well, the officer group, which is overseeing this, is obviously the most important thing is to immediately plug any holes. And that's what they've done right now, as you've seen from report. Authorities to external interim contracts, etc., have been stopped. And I would hope that the controls are being reinstated as we speak, or have been. I don't know what else you... I'm sorry, I didn't really get the gist of your...
In terms of reference, really, how limited are we in looking at this and how much we can delve into it, and how can we report back?
But, Councillor Azar, this is a catastrophic failure of internal systems, which mean that we have to act accordingly. Legal officers and the group that they've put together are all here to ensure that these controls are reinstated and that this cannot happen. Jonathan, do you want to make another comment?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. So if I can make a distinction between two types of controls, please. Those in relation to Commensura and our contractual relationship and arrangements with Commensura, those controls are absolutely in place now. That has happened. Regarding the scheme of delegation, that's the subject of recommendations to SLT, which will then come to your small working group and then on to full council for a decision. What we have not done is to reinstate all of the original controls that were in place in 2009 in the SAP finance system. If we were to do that, if we were to suddenly pull that to a hard stop, we would probably paralyse the organisation. So we absolutely do need to get on and get recommendations into SLT, which the working group have done, and then into your group and on to full council. But as a distinction, we have not we have not pulled that hard lever in the finance system, but we have put controls in place with Commensura.
Thank you. Does that answer your... Yeah. So I'll come back to where we were a minute ago. Has anybody else got any other comments? Sorry. Councillor Hope.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Ryan Hope, Cabinet Member for Customer Culture Community Engagement. And I see this report as part of my day job. So my day job, I do quality assurance, audits, non-conformities. So I'm going to ask some very blunt questions that I ask myself when dealing with those incidents at work. Are we confident that we've contained this issue, or is there further process breakdowns where similar instances may have occurred that still to be discovered? And will we have assurances that full corrective actions from this working group will be shared with this committee and again the wider council? Because yes, this has happened. It's happened for years. It's happened under multiple levels of stewardship and views and personnel. But I think the key is what comes out of this is a big lessons learned with corrections put in place to make this organisation stronger, more robust, and ensure that we are getting value for money with that level of transparency.
Thank you very much. That's the sort of questions actually I've already put to Jonathan Mayer outside this committee, but I thank you for those. Jonathan, would you like to comment or statement? Yeah.
Chairman, I think we have made some of those changes. I referred to the changes we've made in relation to commensura, but we have not made those changes in relation to the scheme of delegation. And I think I would be misleading you and misleading myself if I sat here and said that there are no other gaps in the systems. I think it was that was the question, wasn't it? Are there gaps? And I don't think we can be absolutely certain that there are not other things going on. That's the focus of this work, and there is the other report that will be coming forward to you at a later stage.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to come back. Can I just ask that we do look at this as a wider scope, because myself as a portfolio holder would be devastated to know something like this was happening under my brief. I'm sure my Cabinet colleagues would, as I'm sure the previous Cabinet members, including Gary, who was the Chair of Finance, was just as devastated when he found out this was happening. So can I ask for that reassurance that that is put in this scope of work and that there is that level of general oversight to make sure that there's nothing else happening?
Right. Until you made that statement, I was going to close down item 6, but I think that I need more of an assurance here, and I think internal audit need to. Can you make a comment, please? Because the fact that there may well still be gaps, I want to know what work is being carried out to plug those gaps right now. Not mean what work's going on now. I don't mean I'm making a "you tell me now" statement, if you know what I mean.
We do have more work planned around contracts, and we will, as part of this process, give full consideration to what other work we feel would be helpful coming out of this. So other areas that we feel would benefit from a detailed internal audit review.
I think we're seeking the assurance of a very robust process that's taking place now. Because, Sean, you've got something to say?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this report and the paper that will follow, and obviously the work that SWAP will do, covers probably two aspects. One is the global control systems, which is what's being described as can you provide that assurance that you've changed the control system. And the second element is, can you provide the assurance that everybody's complying with the control system? And so I think what we can say confidently is that where possible, we have changed the global control system to tighten up and make sure that unless it's signed off and all our I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, it cannot proceed. But there is always a risk that someone will find a way to work around that system. So the second piece, I think, is around how we then provide that assurance around how we measure and control compliance to make sure that the systems that are put in place are robust and as kind of unbreakable as possible. But then also we're providing you with assurances that we're monitoring to make sure that is also being compliant, because some of the examples given are relatively isolated to discrete areas of activity or operations. It's not, whereas some of them are more global. Actually, the control system or the scheme of delegation doesn't quite line up with SAP. And there's a consideration at the moment of, do you change the scheme of delegation or do you change SAP, which is the most fit for the future change to make? So again, that's around the global control system versus assurance on everybody's complying with said control system. So to reiterate, we can provide the assurances that what we have put in place is the immediate kind of control system changes, and what we will obviously will be a continued piece of work on is that rolling assurance that people are complying with the new rules, so to speak. So SWAP will play a role in that. The officer group will play a role in that, and we're redesigning the guidance and training to make sure that people are educated into how to then follow those rules. So in the event that there are further breaches or something goes wrong in the future, there's limited ability to say, well, we put that in 2009 and something's kind of gone a bit awry since then. So that's what we're doing. Global controls changed immediately, and then training to identify the isolated areas.
Anybody else? Right, prepared it. Councillor Borden.
Thank you, Chairman. Belinda Borden, Lyme Regis and Charmouth. Yeah, I just found this completely astonishing and some of the numbers really shocking. We have been saying for some time, and I've been trying to do it discreetly, not in public, and then increasingly in public, asking questions about the property, the whole property and assets team. And we were going to put it on the work plan, and then there was a report that was going to come, so nothing, it's not on the work plan. So a bit like Councillor Hope over there, I just hope that the wider picture is being covered, because there's an awful lot that's really quite shocking and concerning here. Thank you.
Obviously, we can, I'm sure everybody in the room agrees with you. If that's it, I'm going to move to item 7, which really is a result of item 6, but I will ask Sally White, Assistant Director for SWAP, to present number 7.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I didn't introduce myself earlier. Sally White, Assistant Director, SWAP Internal Audit Services. On page 26 of your pack, I've presented my annual opinion. As the Head of Internal Audit for Dorset Council, I am offering a limited opinion. This opinion is based essentially on a report that was originally intended to be brought before the committee this evening. However, as the monitoring officer has already indicated, for legal reasons, this has not been possible. Whilst the contract and expenditure compliance report, which has just been discussed, identifies significant control weaknesses, this report alone would not have been enough to have warranted a limited annual opinion in its own right, although it would have likely led us to qualify our opinion. In drawing our conclusions, we've taken into account the excluded report. However, due to the legal restrictions placed on that report, we're not able to discuss this evening in the context of our limited assurance opinion. I can reassure members that this report will be brought to the committee at the earliest opportunity. Additional areas taken into account in forming the opinion, as well as the contract and expenditure compliance report, are the number of fraud or special investigation pieces of work undertaken by SWAP during the previous year, along with some slippage in the timeliness of management implementation of agreed actions. So whilst members are able to discuss the limited opinion offered, it's not possible to discuss the content of the report on which the limited opinion is essentially based. I would also like to reassure members that we will be working closely with officers to agree and implement actions in respect of both of these reports. To aid transparency, once the excluded report is brought before the committee, we would also like to bring back the annual opinion for fuller debate. Of course, members are able to discuss all other aspects of our annual report, and I'll briefly take you through the rest of the report. On page 27, we've provided the strategic risk coverage table, which is familiar to you. As you can see, we have a reasonable range of work across all strategic risk themes for the Council. On page 29 is the dashboard of open management actions, which members are used to seeing in our regular update reports. As the dashboard annotates, the number of overdue actions and those with revised dates has increased slightly over the course of the year, but the graph on page 30 indicates that the number of actions with revised dates has increased, indicating that perhaps actions are taking longer to implement than anticipated. Pages 31 and 32 are a summary of additional added value work that we've undertaken across the year. Page 33 shows members the outcome of our post-audit questionnaires. Where scores are not 100%, we actively seek feedback from management to identify areas for improvement within the team. Over the page, we are drawing your attention to the fact that in 24-25, our work complied with the International Professional Practices Framework, the Public Sector Internal Auditing Standards, and the SITFA Local Government Application Note. There is a change for 25-26, and I covered that in more detail in the planning paper that came to the committee in April. Finally, from page 35 onwards is a summary of all work we've completed in 2024-25 and work that was started and has rolled into the new financial year. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, well, the outcome is obviously of the most interest and the content, but the bottom line is that we can't really discuss the reason for the outcome. So yet again, I find, I'm sure like yourselves, sat here in deep frustration. But I'm happy to take any questions you have regarding the processes that have been followed to date. But you're not going to get the answers that you really, really want tonight. So does anybody wish to make a comment at this point? Okay, well, we will move on. I'm sorry, but that's where we are. Item 11, this is both for notes, 6 and 7. 11? Where did we get to 11? Sorry, I seem to have jumped from 7 to 11. It's actually 8, I guess, is the work programme. John, the work programme, considered a work programme for the committee. I think that we will, after the following meeting, we're going to revisit this and consider our work as in a different format, perhaps, and discuss that after the following report, because a lot of this may be inappropriate now. So I'm moving, unless somebody has any comment. So we'll move to 9 with urgent items. I have no urgent items. And 13, which is really 10, exempt business. There is no exempt business. And that's the end of a interesting, but I would say frustrating meeting for outcomes and answers. But thank you very much for attendance, and for those new members, what an introduction to audit and governance. Thank you. Thank you very much.